short. In 1860, Abraham Lincoln was elected president, and some southern states said, if you elect Lincoln, we'll leave the Union. Well, hey, Lincoln only got 40% of the vote. But the problem was the Democrats split the vote between three men. Let's see if I can remember the name. Breckinridge, Douglas, and Bell. Yeah, the Democrats split their vote. So because the Democrats split their vote, Lincoln, whose name wasn't even on the ballot in any of the southern states, Lincoln carried the northern states, which had more population, and with 40% of the popular vote, Lincoln was elected. And the southern states decided we're going to leave. And I must state, I think most of you already know, Georgia was one of the states that left, 1861. Now fast forward to 2014, there is now talk again of leaving the Union, but I'll leave that because that's, I don't know where that will eventually come, but a lot of people in America are unhappy, just like they were then. Anyway, 11 states left the Union. And then the states that left the Union said that all the government property that's in our states is ours, and they took over 24 of the 26 forts. The only ones that didn't take over was Fort Sumter and Fort Pensacola in Florida. When Fort Sumter would not surrender, the Confederates fired on it. And the people of the North said, hey, they fired on our men and on our territory, let's go get them. And this led to the bloodiest war in American history. Before it was over with, 600,000 people were killed. Not to mention, that is more than we lost in all our other wars combined. And the reason they lost so many was that they were using 1860s weapons, but fighting with manuals that were 1700 manuals. So there was a fighting, everybody would stand up straight and tall and shoot at the enemy. But when you were using repeating rifles, I mean, in the old days, you could do this. Everybody would fire one shot, then step back and reload. The next time, they'd fire one shot and reload. But all of a sudden, these men were shooting 5 or 6 shots before they... And the result was, it was just devastating to the human life. They would not fight. Now, late in the war, some of them started fighting in trenches. But at first, I mean, Stonewall Jackson, Federal General said, the battlefield is not for the trench or the foxhole. The battlefield is for those who get up and fight it. Stonewall Jackson, if he were alive today, he wouldn't last but 30 seconds at that long in a modern-day battlefield. Today, your troops are trained to fight from foxholes and trenches. But in those days, they fought out in the open, and the result was it was just simply devastating. The South problem was they could not afford their losses. The Southern troops killed more Yankees than the Yankees killed them, but the South could not afford the losses they had. The Southern generals were fighting as if they had the same amount of men that the North did, and it was devastating. Sam Houston told them at the beginning, well, Sam Houston was a Northerner who was governor of Texas, but resigned when Texas left the Union. He said, I can't leave the Union, so he resigned as governor. But he told his fellow soldiers, you think you'll beat those Yankees because you're better. I said, I know, you're better than they are. You're better fighters. You're more used to the outdoors. But what you don't know about those Yankees is they will keep on coming back. You'll whip them, and they'll come back. You'll whip them again, they'll come back. And you'll whip them again, and they'll come back. And he said, they're going to win because there are more of them than there are of you. And you can't handle them all. They can handle you in the long run. And the reason, remember those words, is they prove to be so true. Man for man, the Southern soldier was better. All right, anybody want to comment? Make a long story short, I think all of you know, eventually the war ended with the South having to capitulate. The South surrendered and rejoined the Union. The main accomplishment of the Civil War was it permanently ended slavery. Yeah. Any of you studied American history, any chance? I mean, in college, on a college level? Okay, a few, oh yeah, a few of you, yeah. You spend a whole period talking about the Civil War, but we won't. Eventually it led to, all right, when the war was over, the United States grew again as a nation, the economics grew. In the South continued to lag behind. But the North developed more and more people began to move into the big cities. It's called urbanization, industrialization. Cities such as New York, Philadelphia, and Boston grew ever larger. Moderate-sized cities such as Pittsburgh would grow by leaps and bounds. And eventually the United States became the world's richest country and the greatest industrial power. The wealth was not always equally distributed. So the United States had a lot of reform movements. The progressive era, they tried to reform things like make senators have direct election. Oh yeah, the income tax is one of the reforms. Before the income tax, the federal government could only raise money by tariffs. And again, if you study American history, the tariff was such a big issue. But the tariff has somewhat fallen behind as far as an issue because the United States now has the income tax, and the corporate taxes, private income taxes constitute most of the money the government gets. There are still tariffs. No, there are no tariffs on exports. That was outlawed by the Constitution. But imports, goods that we bring into the country, there is a duty or tariff that has to be placed on them. Eventually, the direct primary came about. In other words, today our presidential candidates are nominated by primaries. Before this, our presidential candidates were nominated by party bosses who met in what was called smoke-filled rooms, and they would hash out who would be the candidate, or they'd meet in conventions. Now today, there's still party conventions, but the party convention has already decided who the candidate's going to be before the election, before they even meet. But at one time, the convention chose the candidate. All right. Anyway, the United States eventually became a world power. In 1898, we fought a war with Spain called the Spanish-American War. I got to say this, I can see our time's running out, but a lot of times small wars will occur that will lead to a bigger war. I hope that's not true in this case. We're fighting a small war right now, but it will lead to a bigger war. But in the case of the Spanish-American, it was a small war, and a one-sided war. We easily defeated Spain, but it got us trained and prepped up for World War I. It came later. But as a result of the Spanish-American War, the United States got the Philippines and Puerto Rico and several others, and we freed Cuba. We took and kept the Philippines for several years. We took and still have Puerto Rico, and we got some other islands in the Pacific, Wake Island and Guam, and we also took Hawaii, the Hawaiian Islands. Now, we didn't take them from Spain. We took them from Hawaii. Again, some people criticized us for it, but we took Hawaii and eventually annexed Hawaii as a state. All right, we'll leave there this time.